Hey everyone, welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to walk you through how to write trailer music step by step. We'll cover the structure, key elements, and techniques you need to make your track cinematic and impactful. Whether you're brand new to trailer music or looking to refine your skills, this walkthrough will give you a clear process you can start applying right away. But first, let me explain a little bit of what trailer music is intended for. Trailer music is a powerful storytelling tool. Its main purpose is to capture the audience's attention in a very short amount of time and pull them into a world of film, show, or a video game. Unlike a full soundtrack that can develop over hours, a trailer has a couple of minutes to make an impact. That's why your music needs to be immediate, dramatic, and full of energy. It works hand in hand with visuals the editor can create to make the trailer feel larger. Alright, so let's break down the basics of trailer music. At its core, trailer music usually follows a 3-act structure with breaks in between each act. But in this case, I wrote a 4-act track with 4 breaks and a stinger. The structure of your trailer track really depends on the project or what the client is asking for. Just remember, the important part is that your track has a beginning, a middle, and a climax. Alright, so let's talk about setting the tone. In Act 1, your main goal is to set the mood of the track. Think of this section as the calm before the storm. I started with some simple elements here. I created some drones to create the atmosphere, whooshes for movement, soft brahms for some depth, subtle sound effects, and then some distant impacts to give it a little bit of weight. This sound helps establish the foundation without giving away too much too soon. Now, it's important to remember that even in the opening act, in this case Act 1, you don't want your track to feel static. The listener should always feel like something is happening. In a minute, as I play Act 1, you will notice I introduce new layers, adding subtle synth elements, whooshes, and a riser towards the last few bars to build the tension, which leads perfectly into the first break. Let me go ahead and play this section for you so you can hear what I mean. Again, real quick, as I mentioned earlier, around the halfway point in Act 1, I started layering in some new stuff like sound effects, synth elements, bigger hits, and a riser that built the tension right before the first break to keep the track evolving and to keep the listener engaged. Before we move forward, let me explain what breaks are. Breaks are one of the most important parts of trailer music. They give editors room to breathe and the flexibility to work with your track. A break is basically a short pause between acts, not total silence for the most part, but a moment where the intensity drops down and creates space. For example, a break can be a downer, a huge impact, a boom, or in some cases just silence with a riser for the first few bars that transition into the next act. Breaks for editors are pure gold. These breaks give them natural spots to cut, shift, or rearrange parts of your track so it fits perfectly with the visuals. Remember, editors aren't locked into using your track exactly as you wrote it. Their job is to tell the story of the trailer visually, and your job is to give them the tools to do that smoothly. Let me just play the first break so you hear what I mean. Alright, now let's talk about Act Act 2. Act 2 is where the track really starts to grow. If Act 1 was all about setting the mood and hinting at what's to come, Act 2 is about raising the stakes and pulling the listener deeper into the story. This is where you begin to layer in more instruments, more rhythm, and more intensity. For this section, I introduce synths that play the main melody. This gives a track a stronger sense of identity, something the listener can latch onto as the music develops. Alongside that, I brought in a brass section covering the highs, the mids, and the lows. I also added big hits, deep booms, and layered percussion. I feel these elements help push it forward by creating momentum. Let's have a listen to this section. I'm going to start it from the first break so you can hear the transition from a break to the next act. Again, as I said before, as you notice, I'm constantly adding new elements every few bars or so. It's crucial in trailer music because it keeps the track growing and evolving instead of sounding flat and repetitive. A track that's stagnant will lose the listener's attention very quickly, but a track that's always introducing fresh new layers and ideas keeps the energy moving forward. Editors will pay close attention to this. They want music that feels alive, something that builds momentum and gives them plenty of dynamic moments to cut to. Okay, now we have arrived at Act 3. This is the point where everything starts to come together. In Act 3, I added more synth layers and then brought in a string section to really emphasize the main melody that was first introduced back in Act 2 with the synthesizers. To make it even bigger, I layered in additional brass instruments that support and reinforce that melody, giving the track a more powerful and cinematic punch. On top of that, I introduced more hits and booms to raise the intensity along with more percussion. This time, I also included some low-end drum loops to give the rhythm more drive and weight. And to round it all out, I also added a sub bass, which fills out the low end and makes the whole act feel massive and full. Again, let me start by playing from the second break that leads up to the third act here so you can hear what I mean. Finally, we arrive at Act 4, the ultimate climax of this trailer track. This is where every element comes together at full force. To keep things fresh and engaging, I introduced a new variation of the melody, carried by the strings, brass, and synths. Even though the melody changes here, I made sure it still feels connected to the themes from Acts 2 and 3, so the track remains cohesive. The final act is always the payoff, the moment everything has been building towards to. It should be the biggest, most badass, most massive section of the entire track, full of energy, impact, and emotion. Think of it as the grand finale that leaves the listener with no doubt that they've just experienced the peak of the story. Let's take a listen starting from break 3. Now, one last thing I want to talk about are stingers. A stinger is basically a short, impactful sound effect. Think of it as a final stamp on your track. A simple example of a stinger can be a hit layered with a bomb. A stinger instantly delivers a shock or surprise to the listener. For example, when you are watching a trailer and there's a scene where it's quiet and all of a sudden something pops out of the screen and it scares you. A scene like that is usually accompanied by what's called a stinger. I consider stingers just as important as breaks. If you're writing trailer music, always make sure to include them. They're small moments, but they make a huge difference in how usable and impactful your track is for editors. Let me go ahead and play the stinger that I wrote for this track so you know what I mean. So when you're writing trailer music, keep these key points in mind. Structure your tracks with at least 3 to 4 or 5 acts. Make sure to include breaks to give editors flexibility. Make sure your track evolves by adding new elements. And don't forget to include a stinger at the end to highlight a dramatic moment. In my opinion, these essential tools make your music engaging, dynamic, and most importantly, editor friendly. By following these guidelines, you can increase the chances that your track will stand out and be licensable for trailers, films, and other media. Alright, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to see more, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll be diving into more in-game music to trailer elements and cinematic sound design in future videos. Can't wait to share it with you. I'll see you in the next one.